The attic tenant, the first night, it was a soft tread over the master bedroom, a slow hill tuto that stopped when anyone breathed too loud. They told each other it was pipes, heat-expanding wood, an old Seattle house talking in the rain. The dog stared at the ceiling and didn't bark. That, help it. 2 weeks in the steps, learned their routine pausing above the bathroom when the shower ran, pacing above the kitchen when knives hit the cutting board, settling directly over the couch during movie credits like an audience member waiting for the lights. Sometimes, while falling asleep, they felt a breath that wasn't theirs sink to theirs, a tiny lag, like an echo learning the lines. They called a plumber. He smiled, said Vensnock. Joists complain. Owes his settler. He left a card and a fresh drip. They didn't they? Abbe, before. On a Tuesday, the husband woke to find the hallway closet door cracked open and the attic string dangling, swaying on an air that felt colder than weather. You left that. His wife sighed, but her voice tried to land somewhere it didn't believe. He pulled the string. The ladder sighed down, slow as a tongue. He poked his head into the dark. The attic smelled like dry paper and metal breath. A flashlight cut a narrow hallway through insulation dunes. He swung the beam left. 2 circles flashed back polished screws in a vent, he told himself, and pulled out. They bought a baby monitor to humor the fear, pointed the camera at the attic hatch. At 3:12 a.m. the screen showed the string lifting itself an inch, then lowering, slow and polite. The sound channel captured a whisper that was only air, syllables crushed into white noise, then their names. Accurate. As a bill collector, they slept with the lights on until exhaustion shaved the edges off fear. On Thursday, the house stopped, pretending. While they drank coffee, a footstep crossed the ceiling and didn't stop. Another followed. Then a pause over the table, above their bent heads. They both looked up. Plastered dust fell in a cheap constellation. They called the police. When the officers arrived, they didn't smile. One took the kitchen. The other climbed the ladder. Each step made the house flinch. In the attic something scuffed, then went very still. Seattle PD, the officer said, voice flat with bored authority. Come on out. Silence. Then the faintest scrape, like a fingernail leaving a note in wood. The officer's flashlight found the nest behind the vents. Blankets pilfered from the guest room, a coffee cup with their favorite brands ring-dried in it. A stack of library books they hadn't checked out. A camera cheap, but aimed through a hole sawed, cleanly above the living room fed into a phone with hours of recordings labeled by day. T-U-E-W-E-D. A small cooler held apples with exact bites in them, each bite small and neat. Then there was the wall, where someone had penciled their daily schedule in tiny, careful letters. Next to Saturday. He laughs when she sings off-key. Next to Wednesday. She wears the blue sweater when it rains. Next to tonight. 2:17 she wakes and checks the door. He pretends not to. The officer cleared his throat, said, "Sir," to the dust. The man stood up from behind the joist, like a shadow rethinking itself. He was thinner than the fear had made him. Hair carefully parted, clothes almost clean. He lifted his hands high, easy, agreeable, and smiled a school picture smile. "You're early," he said, disappointed, as if a party had been ruined. They cuffed him, murmuring the lines, and led him down the ladder. The couple stood back and tried not to look at his eyes, but their house made them. He flicked his gaze to the sink, to the couch, to the bedroom door, checking if things were where he'd left them. As he passed the baby monitor on the counter, he tilted his head and said, almost kindly, "You sleep better with the white noise on." The rain station, Channel 3. They changed the locks, replaced the attic hatch, cleaned everything until the lemon stung. Friends came over with wine and advice. Everyone said the same thing. "You're safe now." 2 nights later, the dog barked for the first time. One low, strangled sound and then backed into the bathroom, shaking eyes fixed on the ceiling. The couple froze. Above them, the house held its breath. The monitor lit up at 2:17 a.m., the time penciled on the wall. Motion detected. Addict. The screen showed the new hatch. The string didn't move. Nothing did. Then the camera panned. A quiet, precise slide to the left. It wasn't the physical camera. They could see it on the counter. Still, dumb red light off. But the view shifted anyway, revealing a second hole in the ceiling they had anti-patched because they had anti-known it was there. Perfectly round, perfectly centered above their bed. The angle looked down on their pillows, on two dark shapes. Like heads. In the audio channel, beneath the soft static, a man's voice whispered with the patience of months, speaking not to them, but around them, a special tone reserved for the familiar. "Don't worry," it said, almost fond. "He's just getting the pipes." The forgotten passenger, he picked her up just after midnight on a county road that never had streetlights. The kind of dark that sticks to the windshield. She slid into the back without meeting his eyes, rain dripping from her hair onto vinyl, and said a single thing in a flat, practiced voice. "To the old place, at the edge." The GPS drew a blue vein through fields and half-dead strip malls, then into a neighborhood where the houses leaned like tired teeth. She never spoke again. He tried once. "You've been out late," and the rearview mirror showed only the outline of a face tucked in the corner, hands folded, a pale sleeve with a dark cuff. He turned the heat up, the cab filled with damp cold anyway. At the turnoff, the road narrowed to gravel, then to mud. The house appeared like a Brewster Stories, front porch sagging, windows blinded by warped shades. His phone's signal bars fell to 1, then none. "We're here," he said. Have to be polite, have to break the quiet. He looked up from the meter, back to the mirror. The back seat was empty. He didn't whip around. Not right away. His throat did the trick, first shrank. The mirror showed an indent in the seat, wet in a neat oval, a dark crescent where a heel had pressed. The seatbelt beside it hung twisted, as if someone had worried it between their fingers all the way there. He turned slowly. Palms sweating on the wheel, and saw only the smear of rain and those two wet marks. One where a head had leaned against the window, one where breath had fogged a tight oval in the glass. He wiped the fog with the back of his hand. It didn't smear. It was on the outside. "Okay," he said, voice barely there. He tapped end on the app. It didn't respond. The fare clock kept counting up. The map recentered itself without his touch, pinning his car to the house with a thin red line labeled "Drop-off, in progress." Headlights slid over the porch. There was a shape by the door, tall and still, like a coat track. Then the porch light stuttered to wake 1, 2, 3 times. Then he saw it was a coat, a long one. Hung on nothing. He put the car in drive. The wheels spun once before catching. As the car rolled, the app announced in its cheerful chime, "Passenger left item behind." A new prompt appeared. "Return to last pickup for 5-star bonus." In the rear view, something pale bloomed in the seat again, weight denting the vinyl. Not a full, seen just the rough outline presser makes. The air turned colder, so fast his breath fogged. The app's voice dropped an octave, like the speaker was full of water. Turned around. He didn't. He took the first corner too fast, gravel slapping the undercarriage. The house vanished behind bare trees. The bonus, prompt, pulsed, turn around. His phone vibrated new message from an unknown number. "Thank you for the ride. Could you walk me to the door? It's dark." He threw the phone onto the passenger seat. It buzzed again. A second message, timestamp 3 minutes ago. "I'm at the county road. No cars out here. Hello." He risked the mirror. The seat was empty again, no dent. No breath on glass, just a long, wet streak across the middle, like something had been pulled, slow and careful, to the floor. He swallowed and checked the road. The app's map didn't show streets anymore. It showed a looping line, like someone had traced a finger in a circle around his car, tighter and tighter. Rerouting. the voice said brightly. "Return to the door." "What door?" he whispered. A porch light flared ahead, identical to the one he'd left. The same house stood in the wash of his beams, same sagging steps, same coat hung on the air. He hadn't turned around. A Kineu A Aden T. The mile counter ticked up anyway, charging him by the minute to bring her home. He put the car in park without meaning to. The engine idled, then coughed in a way old engines do when they hear winter coming. He listened to his own breath. The rear lock clicked. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The passenger door opened slow, weather stripping peeling with a soft kiss. Rain wafted in, smelling like old books left in a basement. Whack. The car lifted an inch as the weight left. He stared straight ahead at the porch. The coat swayed once, as if a breeze moved through it. Then it turned and went inside, the door opening a crack with no hand on the knob. His app pinged. Trip completed. 1 star deducted. Driver did not walk. Passenger to door. He left. Finally, the road straight and simple under his tires. In ease, mirror the house sank back into the dark, like it wanted to drag the night over itself. He didn't check his backseat again until he hit the interstate. When he did, the only thing there was a small, damp rectangle of paper, stuck to the vinyl by rain. Believe it up. It was a printed receipt. The kind you get when someone pays cash and asks for a record. Pickup. County Road 7. Drop off. Edge House. Tip. Generous. Handwritten across the bottom in a pale, looping hand. Walk me next time. Seconds later, his phone vibrated one more time. New ride request. Pick up. You're home. Passenger. The same name as the last ride. Note, don't forget me again. The attic tenant at 3:12 a.m. in her Gainesville studio. Lena woke to a wet smack, like a fish thrown on tile. The room was dark, except for the red blinking of her router. On the closet mirror, a bloody handprint, bloomed fresh, glossy, 5 long fingers dragging toward the floor. She froze and listened. Nothing. Door. Deadbolts still thrown from the inside. Window. Latched. Her phone didn't recognize her face. With how it shook, she flicked on the light. The print wasn't hers. The palm was too wide, the fingers too thin, and the ring finger didn't have a nail. She called 911. Dispatch told her to stay on the line and stay put. She whispered, "I live alone. No pets. No guests." Shadeen team mentioned what Shadee heard every night since September. That faint rolling sound above the ceiling, like marbles in a bowl. "Any attic access?" The dispatcher asked. "Not in here," Lena said. "Only in the hallway." She backed up to the door, kept her eyes on the mirror. The handprint had begun to dry at the edges, curling like old paint. She watched it from movement, like a hawk. That's why she saw it. A second handprint forming beside the first, not pressed all at once, but coming through the glass from the inside palm swelling up under the silvering. Fingers pushing forward as if surfacing from deep water. The mirror rippled, the way heat does over a road. She unlocked the door to flee, then stopped. The chain latch was still set, and she knew she had set it before bed. The chain was taut. Something on the other side of the door had already pulled it tight from the hallway. "Officers are en route," the dispatcher said. "Do you have a safe room?" "My bathroom." She edged toward it. The mirror hands dragged down, leaving streaks, then paused at mouth height, as if waiting for a face to press through. She ducked into the bathroom and locked it. The vent above the shower gave a soft, damp breath out. She stared at it. There were tiny red flakes caught in the metal slats, like rust except. They were wet. She turned on the shower full hot to fog the room and drown the vent noise. Steam bloomed. Something in the vent whispered back, a matching hiss, like it was trying not to be heard. Her phone buzzed. A text from the property manager. Las 3:16 IMA. Stop calling about noises. There is no tenant in the attic. We sealed it last year. You signed the form. She hadn't called him tonight. The bathroom mirror fogged over. In the fog, letters appeared backward from the other side of the glass, drawn by a fingertip she couldn't see. It wrote, "Thank you." For what? She whispered before she could stop herself. The answer came fast, jagged, smearing the wet. For leaving the ladder. She didn't own a ladder. The hiss in the vent turned into a wet swallow, then a sound like a hand sliding down a narrow shaft, skin squeaking on metal. Footsteps in the hallway, a solid knock. "Gaines Bill, Bede." A woman shouted, "Ma'am, step away from the door." Lena cracked the bathroom door, scanning the studio. The mirror was quiet now, the prints drying dark like old varnish. The front door chain hung slack again, innocent, as if it had never been pulled. She opened for the officers with hands high. 2 uniforms stepped in, checking corners, closets, under the bed. "You're sure you're locked up?" the woman asked. "No one else has a key." "No one," Lena said. "The attic is in the hole." The male officer glanced at the ceiling. "Building access panel." They all stepped into the hallway. The square of wood was right there, dust-rimmed, a neat circle of grime around a finger hole where a hook goes. The woman officer shone her flashlight. "No ladder," she said. "Maintenance would need one." "See?" The male officer pointed at the wall. A pale rectangle showed where something had leaned for a long time. Fresh streaks cut through the dust down to the baseboard, like something heavy had been dragged away in the last hour. "Maintenance must have moved it," he said, writing it down. The woman nodded, though her mouth was tight. They came back in to take the report. The male officer's radio crackled. A separate unit requesting backup at this address 6 months prior. "Copy," he muttered, frowning. "There's a note here about a previous tenant. No contact after a welfare check. They found the lease terminated by family. I asked the manager about the girl before me," Lena said. He said she moved. The woman officer's beam passed over the bathroom. "C'est pas usé." "Ma'am," she said softly. "Did you cut yourself?" Lena looked. On the lip of the sink, there were small crescents of dried blood where someone had placed fingertips to steady themselves. The spacing was wrong for a human hand to narrow. Too many. 7 perfect ovals. "We'll canvas," the woman said quickly, like covering a hole. "Do you want to stay with a friend tonight?" Lena nodded because the right answer was move, now, and because staying sounded like drowning. She packed, while the officers lingered, radios murmuring. The male officer stepped to the big mirror in the main room, studying the red prints with professional detachment. "That's odd," he said. "What?" Lena hated how fast the question came. Point. The bloody handprints overlapped a faint, dry shape beneath the glass holder, sealed under the silvering, visible only when the light struck right, not hands. Feet. Small. Bare. Facing upward, like someone had pressed their souls against the back of the mirror and stood there a long time. The woman officer called him to the door. "We've got to move," she said. "Manager is on site." They left together. The property manager stood in the hall in slippers, breath sour with sleep. "Drama," he muttered, wagging a finger. "Students in there." The ceiling above them answered with a single, slow creak, like weight shifting. The woman officer lifted her light to the access panel. A wet drip fell from the edge and hit her sleeve, blooming red on the fabric. She drew a breath through her teeth and looked at Lena, not unkind. "Pack fast." Lena grabbed her bag and stepped into the hall. As the door clicked shut behind her, she realized the chain had slid into place on its own again. Inside, unseen, the mirror finished fogging. Words formed once more, neat and careful. "I like your new door." The last letter smeared as something pressed its face to the glass from the wrong side. Listening for keys that were no longer in the lock. The stairwell woman, old building, thin walls, winter heat banging the pipes. Every night around 2 a.m., the fire escape stairwell clicked and echoed with slow, careful steps, the kind that paused on each landing like a listener taking notes. Tenants made jokes, slid towels at their doors, turned up white noise, pretended the rhythm didn't match their own breathing when they got nervous. On a Thursday, Evan woke to the footsteps stopping outside his floor. He padded to the hall, the red exit bulb washing everything a cheap theater red. The stairwell door's wired glass window was a little square, thumb smudged. Beyond it, the concrete steps fell away like a throat. He leaned and looked. A woman stood on the landing below, too close to the rail, motionless, head tilted up, smiling at him. No teeth, just that patient, closed-mouth smile people give infants. Her hair was wet, not dripping. Wet, like it had been brushed flat after a soak. The kind of wet that smells like coins. Evan jerked back, heart in his throat. He laughed at himself, the laugh people used to scare off dogs. He looked again. She was closer, still on the lower landing, but nearer by the exact width of the door. Same smile, eyes glassy, like she was holding a breath he'd forgotten to take. A single drop slid from her hairline to her cheek and didn't fall. It clung, round and perfect, as if gravity in there was a suggestion. He grabbed the knob to make sure it was locked. Cold bit his palm. The metal felt like it had been outside all night. He twisted it experimentally. It turned. He froze. The door didn't move, but the latch fully gave with a soft, willing click, like a mouth opening. From the stairwell, half a floor down, came the faintest whisper of a sound no voice. Just the hollow of a landing, the coiled reverb of a stairwell end in it. His name, not spoken. But returned to him the way echoes return a note they improved. He told himself the building carried everything. That old New York architecture was just a pipe organ for fear. He let go of the knob. The latch slid itself back into place, a tiny metallic decision. "Hey," he called, too loud in the hall. "You okay?" The smile didn't change. Her pupils didn't catch the exit glow. Something in him counted the floors below and failed to finish. The stairwell felt longer than the building. He lifted his phone, thumb finding camera, screen lighting his face. On T-screen window showed an empty landing, just concrete, the rail, a rust blossom where the wall had been patched. He zoomed nothing. He looked up. The woman looked back. He flipped to selfie mode, angling the phone so his face and the window shared the frame. In the screen corner, over his shoulder, something pale and long leaned into view, smiling. It wasn't standing on a landing. It was standing where the door ought to open, like it knew the Hing's future. His throat made a sound he didn't own. He lowered the phone. The window showed the landing below again, and now she was right there, flush with the glass, the smile thinning. Her eyes were just a little too high, like she'd grown since he blinked. She lifted a hand, palm, to the glass. The wired mesh grid cut her palm into neat squares. He noticed then her fingers were too many. Not by a lot, enough to make the math in his head trip. She didn't press. She waited. Behind Evan, down the hall, another apartment Isolok turned. A neighbor's door opened an inch, then closed again. A timid animal. He wanted to shout for help, but the idea of saying anything with the door unlocked felt like spelling his name wrong on purpose. He took a step backward. The window fogged on his side with his breath. He wiped it with his sleeve, quick. He had to look again. She wasn't at the glass now. The landing was empty. The rail caught light. The stairwell was only a stairwell, a practical throat down which people dragged laundry and regret. He exhaled. A laugh leaked, relieved and ugly. Then the footsteps started again, but not below. Above, he looked up reflexively. The wired glass glared, a simple square of darkness. The steps came down fast, this time, skipping the pauses, a happy child's run taught to adult legs. They stopped right outside the door. He didn't breathe. The knob, under his hand, though he didn't remember reaching for it, turned itself left, then right, testing him. A polite knock sounded 3 soft taps on the exact center of the door, where no one could reach without opening it. He stepped back, hand lifting. The door stayed shut. The building hummed. The exit bulb buzzed. From inside the stairwell, inches away, a whisper that wasn't breath, but space folding said, bright and pleased, "There you are," as if he'd finally come home. He ran. In his apartment, he threw every deadbolt. He put a chair under the knob because that's what movies do. The footsteps resumed. Slow now, unhurried, going past his floor. Down, down, farther than the building, like a spoon circling a drain without ever committing. He didn't sleep. The next morning, he called the super. "Someone in the stairwell all night," he said, smiling. The super sighed the way men sigh when pipes are involved. "We'll check. Probably some neighbor's guest smoking." That afternoon, a notice went up near the elevators. "Please keep stairwell doors closed. Safety first." Beneath it, in a neat hand, someone had penciled, "She can't open them from her side." Evan avoided the stairs for a week. Then the elevator froze between floors with 2 grocery bags and a strangeresque cologne in his throat. He took the stairs, telling himself daylight cures floor plans. On his landing, halfway up, he stopped. The new notice had been moved to the stairwell door, taped over the wired glass like a patch. He could see only the white rectangle and his own shaped shadow. He lifted the corner for 1 second. The other side of the glass was a mirror now, reflecting a stairwell that wasn't their steps, with no rust, with deeper shadows, with exit signs that pointed inward. His reflection didn't lift the paper. It smiled up at him, motionless. He dropped the corner. Paper slapped the door. Something on the other side lifted its hand, palmed the glass. A fraction too many fingers aligning with his own. That night, the footsteps stopped at 2 a.m., directly outside his door, and didn't move for a very long time. When he finally peeked through the peephole, the hall was empty. No feet. No woman. Just the red exit glow, bright as a wound. A went to, bit heart in his throat, and slept hard from terror. At 3:17 a.m., his apartment door clicked to the unlocked position, neat as a practiced smile. No footsteps followed, only the quiet satisfaction of a building that had learned his schedule. The doll in the woods, they found it near the creek in rural Pennsylvania. A porcelain doll with glassy blue eyes, tied to a sapling by a frayed clothesline, the knot cinched like a little noose under its painted chin. "Creepy," Mason said, poking its dress with a stick. Liam laughed and left it swinging. Casey filmed it for a story. By sunset, they'd all sworn to stop texting about it, like saying the word made it heavier. At 2:13 a.m., Mason woke to 3 slow knocks on his second-floor window. He lay still, listening to the old house breathe. Another knock, lighter, like fingernails. He pulled the shade with 1 finger. The doll's face was smashed against the glass, eyes shining with streetlight, mouth chipped into a silent O. Its dress clung weightily to the pane, as if it had climbed there and flattened itself to look in. Mason jerked back, heartbeats sprinting, then looked again. It was gone. His phone buzzed in the dark. A video from Casey, sent 20 seconds earlier. The thumbnail was his window in the grainy zoom from the sidewalk, his room lit faintly blue. He hit play. The footage shook. Case's whisper bled through. "Dude, tell me that's a prank." The video showed the doll's pale head turning against the glass, slow, like a fish drifting. Then the camera dipped to the sidewalk, empty, then back up to the second-floor window. The doll was inside. Mason dropped the phone. From the hallway, the floorboards answered with soft, dragging steps. He grabbed the doorknob, but the metal was cold and slick, like a wet coin. He wiped his hand on the blanket and tried again. The knob turned. The hole was empty, the nightlight pooling amber at the top of the stairs. The steps came again, not from the hole behind him, from the closet. His phone lit with 2 more messages. "Liam, It's at my window too. Then, a second later. Wait. Not window. The typing dots appeared, then froze, then vanished. Mason stared at the closet door. A small, porcelain palm slid out from the crack at the bottom, fingers delicately tapping the floorboards, as if checking the grain for a heartbeat. Tap. 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 He bolted for the window. Yank lifted the sash, ready to scream for his parents. His neighbor. The night pressed close. The yard below was a silver smear. On the grass, directly beneath his window, lay the doll, neck rope, trailing like a tail. Face angled up at him, the red handprint at 3:12 a.m. in Gainesville. Mia woke to the soft tick of a dresser clock and a metallic smell, sharp as a coin held too long. On the mirror above her desk bloomed a fresh, wet handprint, long fingers, smeared heel, a line of red dragged down like a signature. She lived alone. The deadbolt sat horizontal, chain latched, windows locked, AC humming. She didn't scream. Se listen. Apartment silence, the kind with its own pulse. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and followed the drip that wasn't dripping. The print glistened but never fell. Up close, the lines were two detailed whorls, ridges, a scar through the center of the palm like a pale lightning strike. She checked the door anyway. Locked. She checked under the bed. Dust. Closet. Jeans. A laundry basket. The smell of detergent and cold air. On her way back, she saw another smear on the bathroom mirror. Smaller, like a child's touch beside a larger palm. She wiped at it with toilet paper. The paper came away clean. The handprint did not move. Her camera app shuttered. In the photo, the mirror was empty. No handprint. No bathroom. Just a flat, black square, like an unlit screen. She took another. Same black. She flipped to video. The screen showed her face shaky pale and, behind her, her bedroom mirror, spotless. Except when she turned to look, it wasn't spotless. The bloody print had multiplied. One on the mirror, one on the closet door, one high above the headboard, upside down, as if someone had stood on the ceiling and reached. "Hello," she called, because the word was a spell more than a question. Something answered from the mirror. Not. A voice breath. The glass fogged in the shape of another handprint beneath the red one. This one warm and gray with condensation, matching the ridges exactly, as if a living palm pressed from the other side. The fog hand slid down the glass and stopped at the desk's edge, fingers curling like they had found a lipped grip. Mia backed to the door, fingers working the chain. The deadbolt clicked open. She yanked. The door didn't move. She reached for the peephole. Dark, not blocked full. Something was standing too close outside, covering the lens with skin. She put her ear to the wood and heard the slow rasp of breath on the other side, measured to match her own. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Unknown airdrop request. Mirror photo. Her thumb twitched and accepted. The new image flooded her screen. Her room, her mirror, her bed. In the photo, the mirror was perfectly clean, but the reflection in the glass wasn't her room at all. It was a hallway lit by a red exit sign, cinder block walls, a fire alarm pulled down, a handprint on the far wall, smeared like a dragged stop. At the very edge of the frame, a shoulder turned away. The file name read, "You left me." Her throat closed. Last semester, the dorm evacuation, alarms at 2 a.m. Smoke heavy in the stairwell. The girl who never came back. The rumor that she'd gone out the wrong door and found a dead end where a hallway used to be. Mia remembered the heat, the crush, the moment she'd looked back and seen a hand slap the glass of the locked door. Red, red, red. The mirror fogged again. Lower now. A child's handprint, tiny. Perfect. Then another beside it, angled like it was reaching to be lifted. "Please," Mia whispered to the door, to the glass. To whoever pressed against her peephole like a listening ear, the chain lifted itself with a small, bright hingle. The door opened an inch, then an inch more, slow as a smile. The hallway light bled in across the carpet. Mia leaned to look. The peephole was empty now. No eye, no skin. Just the hole, just the fire extinguisher, just the green exit sign 3 doors down. Her phone buzzed again. Another image slid in. The same hallway from her mirror. The red exit sign flickering. The cinder block walls sweating with heat. In the center, a new handprint appeared on glass hers. This time, her whorls, her scar. Underneath, in fog that didn't belong in a photograph, a message wrote itself backward, letters curling from the inside out. Stay with me. In her apartment, the bloody print on the mirror began to dry from the edges inward, darkening to the color of old rust. The upside-down hand above a headboard pressed deeper, the wall creaking like a breath held too long. The door finished opening all the way. On the other side, the hallway was not her hallway anymore. The carpet was gone. The air moved wrong, hot and thin, tasting of pennies and burned sugar. At the far end, where the green exit sign should have been, something red pulsed like a slowed heart. Between her and that light, the outline of a person waited, turned sideways, face angled to the mirror in her room rather than the open door. It lifted its hand and pressed the palm to the air. Behind Mia, the mirror did the same. She did the only thing she could think of to break the geometry. She lunged forward and slammed the door. The mirror cracked, not with a single shatter, but with 9 thin lines radiating from the center of the bloody handprint, spidering out like a map. Each fracture caught her face and split it. Each shard showed a slightly different room. The same desk with the clock stopped at 3:12. The same bed with the sheets pulled tight, the same door already open, the same hallway with no one in it. The same hallway with someone stepping closer, the same hallway pulsing red, the same hallway dark, the same hallway wet, the same hallway filled edge to edge with small handprints all the way down to the stairwell. Her phone buzzed one last time. The airdrop wanted to send a video. She declined without touching it. The video accepted anyway. On the screen, cracked mirrors smiled back at her with 9 mouths. And one by one, the bloody handprints peeled themselves from the glass and began to crawl. Each set of fingers moved at the same slow pace, leaving no stain, only pressure until they reached the frame of the screen and tapped from inside, polite as knuckles on a locked door. From the hallway, Knuckles answered. 3 slow knocks. Mia didn't move. The door didn't either, but the chink had carefully lifted itself again. The closet door, the first time the closet door slid open, Garrett blamed the house settling and slept with his feet pressed against the bottom of his bed, like a swimmer bracing for a wave. The second time, he told his mom. She laughed it off old latch. Autumn air. The usual speech then wedged a chair under the knob so it couldn't drift. That night, the door stayed put. The chair did not. In the morning, it was 2 inches to the left, turned politely aside. On Thursday, she checked the hinges, tightened the screws, and kissed his forehead. See, fixed. He slept with the lamp on. At 2:13 a.m., the lamp clicked off by itself, and the door whispered open just enough to show a slice of black, thin as a paper cut. By Friday, sleep had a price. When she tucked him in, he whispered, "It's not coming in. It's trying to get out." She swallowed the shiver and said goodnight anyway. After dishes, after emails, after a shower that didn't quite get warm, she climbed the stairs to prove a point to herself. The door was shut. She put her palm to it. The wood felt cool and pulsing, almost, with the faintest tick-tick, like a fingernail on the other side testing paint. She laughed out loud at her own heartbeat and opened it wide. The closet smelled like dust and detergent and the sweet plastic of toy bins. But on the inside of the door, from mid-height to the baseboard, were scratches. Not random parallel rakes. Shallow at first, then deeper, like someone learning how to drag. Beneath the white paint, a darker layer showed through in thin animal stripes. She ran a fingertip along one gouge and felt a tiny curl of wood lift like a hangnail. "Garrett," she called, forcing lightness. A was in bed, eyes open, not blinking. "Did you do this?" He shook his head without looking at her. "It hates when you look." She turned back to the door, and for a second, the scratches looked fresh, edges damp, as if breath had softened them from the other side. "Okay," she said, sudden practical. She fetched blue painter's tape, a Sharpie, and a steel ruler from the junk drawer, measured the deepest lines, marked the date and the time. "We're done being scared of a draft." That night, she sat on the floor by his bed with her back to the wall, facing the closet. The chair was wedged, the door taped in a bright blue X. Phone in her hand, recording. At 1:41 a.m., the house exhaled. At 1:53, the heat kicked on. At 2:06, the blue X bowed outward. Whoosed a breath, like someone leaned their forehead against it. Her phone caught the sound. A soft, steady rhythm, not scratching, not tapping. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. Pause. Learning the tempo of her breathing. "Stop," she said. The counting matched her word. 4 letters, 4 taps. She stood, every hair in her arm sparking. "This is ridiculous," she announced to nothing. "We are going to sleep." She unplugged the lamp to remove the temptation of flickers. The room went dark enough to feel. Somewhere below the floor, the fridge cycled with a low hum. She climbed into bed beside Garrett and let her eyes adjust until the door was just a shape. When Saya woke, it was to the sound of wood moving fatigued. Resigned, dawn smear at the window. The door, blessedly, shut. The chair still in place. The tape intact. And on the inside of the door when she opened it at 7:12, braced, camera rolling, the scratches were gone, not repaired. Gone. The inside panel was perfectly smooth, not even old brush marks from paint. Bare wood, like no end had ever touched it. Her blue tape X lay neatly on the closet floor, cut clean along both strips into 4 equal pieces, aligned like a careful child had arranged them to keep the symmetry. She stared hard enough to feel dizzy. Then she crouched and saw them tiny pale crescents of paint dust settled along the threshold, all facing outward, as if something had licked the door clean from the inside and pushed the crumbs into the room. "See," she said to Garrett, voice thin and cheerful. It stopped. So he lay on his side with the blanket tucked to his chin, looking at the wall. She touched his shoulder. "Hey, buddy." He turned his head too slowly, like remembering how he smiled the way kids smile when they're trying to make adults feel better. "It told me you'd do that," he whispered. "Open it." Her stomach fell through the floor. "What?" "It wanted the scratches gone," he said, almost proud eyes, sliding past her to the door. They were on the wrong side. She followed his gaze. The outer face of the closet, Dorotha's side, that faced the room now, wore fresh gouges from top to bottom, deep enough to catch light, furred with splinters. 4 at a time, and at her own eye level, carved with a slow, patient hand, was a word she recognized in the uneven spacing of her sharpied measurement marks. Out the farmhouse visitor, he saw the headlights crawl up his gravel drive just past midnight. 2 pale eyes moving slow, rolling to a stop by the barn like a stranger holding its breath. The engine idled steady as a heartbeat. No doors opened, no dome. Light, just exhaust drifting white in the cold, swallowed by the tall corn. He grabbed his coat, clicked on his flashlight, and crossed the yard. The beams painted the old barn, silver and black. Coyotes quieted. Crickets cut out. He cupped a hand to the driver's. Window unfound it already down. Glass sunk into the door like it had slipped away to listen. The seat was empty. Keys in the ignition. Heat running. "Hello," he called. Voice small in all that open dark. The radio crackled on. No station, just a field of whisper and wind, as if the car had tuned to the night around it. Beneath the hiss came a sound he knew the way you know your own name. The clatter-snap of his barn door latch. It was happening now, in the radio. Then, on the other side of the yard, the real barn door answered with the same metallic tongue, slow and careful, like a mouth learning words. He turned toward the barn. The big sliding door had cracked open an inch. The gap was black as the underside of a stone. Something moved inside, no shape, only a wrongness, like heat tremble on cold air. He leaned into the car and killed the engine. The silence fell so hard the corn creaked. The headlights stayed on, in the moment, before he stepped back. The rearview mirror caught his face. In, someone sitting in the back seat behind him. Tall enough that the headrest cut the shadow at the throat. He spun, banging his shoulder on the doorframe. The back seat was empty. The rear view still showed the passenger, motionless, hands folded where knees should be. He slammed the door. The headlights blinked twice, like a nod. "Get off my property," he said. To the car, to the mirror, to the barn, to God. From the barn's second pair of headlights bloomed a life deep inside the dark, angled wrong, too high for any truck, too close together for any ATV. They drifted forward without engine noise and stopped just shy of the door gap, staring at him through dust that wasn't there. He took 2 steps toward the barn, raising his flashlight. The beam touched the dust and showed him it wasn't dust at all, but chaff, wheat hair stirred by breath. The breath was coming from the dark, patient and wet. Wheat, the dead leaf sweetness of a silo in August. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. "I'm out by the barn. Car won't stop. Come quick." The time stump said 12:03 a.m. He looked at the empty car. He looked at the barn. Another text arrived. Same number. "Don't come to the car." He swallowed. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Me." The radio, though he'd turned it off, spoke up again, soft as a lullaby. In the passenger footwell, the little speaker whispered in his father's voice, 30 years younger and full of winter. "Leave the door open. Son, I'll be right back." His father had died in that barn. A fall, a neck, a latch, never quite catching. The rearview mirror tilted on its own, angling at the barn door, at the twin lights in the black. The car's cabin smelled like old hay now, like the coat his father wore, until the sleeves turned to rope. A thin line of chaff slid across the dashboard, spelling nothing, and then, as if a fingertip steadied, tracing the letters STAY. He stepped backward, gravel grinding under his heel. The barn lights eased forward another inch, pressing against the door gap until the wood bowed inward around them like a pillow. The car's headlights dimmed in sympathy, sharing a current like 2 hearts sinking. His phone rang his landline's ringtone, not the cell's. The caller ID said, "Home." But he was home. He answered. Anyway, on the line, he heard the barn from miles away. The hum of flies sleeping in the rafters, the soft clink of a chain swaying, the slow drag of a boot across old concrete. Then, quiet and close, the same voice from his childhood, warmer now, like the corn whispering, "Come, turn me off." The headlights by the barn leaned, just enough to cast long shadows from nothing in the doorway. The shadow of a man reached out, stretching across the yard until it touched his boot like a dog nosing for a hand. He lifted the keys from the idling car, though. He'd already killed it, and the engine coughed back to life anyway, as if the car had swallowed its own breath and kept breathing. The rear view showed the backseat passenger now sitting in the driver's seat, hands on nothing, face where the steering wheel would be if there were any face to see. The mirror fogged, cleared, fogged again, like something practicing. He threw the keys into the field. They vanished without a sound. The engine didn't care. "Okay," he said to the night. To the barn? To the car? "Okay." He turned and ran for the porch light. Halfway there, the farmhouse lights snapped off by themselves, one by one, dwindling back to the dark like an animal closing its eyes. The yard shrank. The sky lowered. Behind him, the barn door opened the rest of the way without a scrape. The twin lights slid out and began to cross the gravel toward the idling car, slow and soundless, drawing a long, dry line of chaff between them, like reins. He reached the porch and grabbed the knob. It turned, the door cracked. On the other side was his kitchen bright warm radio on end. The engine's headlights pooled on the floorboards, sliding in ahead of him, washing the linoleum with moving white, as if the car had been idling in his house all along. The smell of hay filled the hallway. The radio in the kitchen, tuned to nothing, murmured, "I'm home." He slammed the door and put his back to it, breath coming in quick bursts, through the wood, through his coat, through his ribs. He felt it, the vibration of an engine idling inches away on the other side. Out in the yard, where the porch light should have been, the barn and the car faced each other like two animals deciding who would blink. The radio whispered his name again, patient, practiced, already learning the turn of it. Out by the barn, the gravel began to move, no wind, no wheels, drawing a slow circle around the idling car until it stood inside a neat ring, like a pen. The headlights lifted and turned toward the farmhouse door, steady and bright. He kept his hand on the knob and waited for the knock. Instead, from the kitchen radio, his own voice came back to him from 3 seconds into the future, small and far away, saying exactly what he was about to say, the words he hadn't decided on yet. "Don't open it." The basement lights. He lived alone, so the glow under the basement door felt like a typo in the nitron, out of place, humming. He called out anyway, a polite Colorado habit that made the quiet sound colder. No answer. Just the bulb's thin buzz and the old wood breathing. He cracked the door. Stairs fell into yellow light. At the bottom, cement floor held a puddle that wasn't there that morning, a still, shallow mirror. In it, his reflection stood one step ahead of him, already at the bottom, already turned toward the switch, already smiling. It was his face, but fixed, like the grin had found its final version. He lifted a foot, testing the first tread. In the reflection, he was already 2 steps down. Feroce. The grin didn't. "Okay," he said, voice thin, not funny. He backed up. The reflection didn't. It kept descending, slow and patient, like it knew the timing of his fear. He slammed the door. The light under the seam didn't dim. It grew, a pale line turning fat, then bright, until it bled around the frame like dawn. The old latch clicked softly, as if something on the other side politely tested it. He grabbed the breaker panel by the kitchen and flipped basement lights. The house went darker. The seam under the door stayed bright. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and held it toward the gap. On the screen, stairs were unlit, vanishing into black. No glow, no puddle, just emptiness yawning. He lowered the phone. The light stabbed his eyes. He put the camera back up. Black. He took a breath he didn't like and lowered the phone again. Someone knocked from the other side, 3 light taps, his own rhythm, a nervous habit he knew, like a fingerprint. Then his voice, easy and relieved, came muffled through the door, the way his voice sounded on voicemails he never liked to hear. "Hey, it's me. Don't freak out. I hus forgot. I'll shut it off." He stared at the handle. The metal looked warmer than the room. "Say something only I know," he said, stalling like a child at the top of a diving board. "A beat." "Then you left the ring in the freezer when she left, so you wouldn't find it by accident. You told your mother you lost it on a hike." The kitchen clock ticked once, too loud. The handle turned a fraction, stopped, turned back. Polite. Patient. He stepped away. The house had that heavy winter silence where sounds feel like footprints. He went for his boots by the door. His jacket. Keys. He could leave. He should leave. He would. The basement lights went out, dark under the seam. Quiet. Just the house again. Nothing humming. The bulb surrendered, the air loosening like a held breath released. He exhaled, laughing once ugly, shaky. Dead bulb, he said to the empty room, like the house needed it on record. Dead. The bulb snapped back on, brighter than before, as if closer. The door opened by an inch, not pushed from below, but pulled from his side, as if his own hand had moved and he'd missed it. From the gap, the smell of cold water rose. He saw a sliver of the bottom tread, and on it, the padella-perfect pane of stillness. In it, his reflection stood at the top of the stairs, right where he was, phone in hand, breath held, not smiling. Behind that reflection, something taller leaned in a second face over his shoulder, wearing his grin too wide, like a mask tugged at the edges. He dropped the phone. It flipped once, light skittering, lens catching the door just as it swung open without a sound. The house didn't creak. The furnace didn't kick. The clock didn't tick. Everything paused long enough for him to hear the softest sound. His own footfalls on the stairs, coming up toward him from the wrong direction. When the first shoe reached the top, it was his, tread-worn and muddy in the exact places his were. It stopped at the threshold and waited, toes pointed at him, like a mirror that had found a way out. Down below, all the lights went off again, all at once. In the dark, he felt breath at his eerie's breath. Practiced back at him and heard himself whisper, cheerful and close, "Relax. I'll turn them off." The midnight delivery. The graveyard shift at the Sunoco off I-57 was dead quiet when the bell chimed and a man in a parka walked in without a face. The rain wanted to remember blurry in a way that felt like a trick of the fluorescence. He didn't meet her eyes, didn't glance at the nacho machine, just set a plain brown package on the counter, turned, and slipped back into the hiss of sleet like he'd only ever been a shadow. She waited, listening for a door chime that didn't come, watching the security mirror show her standing alone with a box that suddenly felt warm. No return footprints on the wet mat. No car. Engine, just the electric hum and the pump numbers ticking from an empty hose. Inside the package was a VHS tape, spine unlabeled, plastic scuffed to a gray sheen that made her think of teeth. She laughed out loud because who still used tape sand, then realized the TV behind the lottery stand had an old combo deck for training modules. Of course it did. Of course tonight. She slid it in. The screen bloomed with static, then steadied on her own bedroom. Crooked blinds, thrift store lamp, the soft dent her body made in the mattress. There she was exactly as she'd left herself 3 hours earlier before clocking in asleep on her side. One arm flung out, mouth parted just enough to show a sliver of shine. Her first thought was obvious. Old footage, stolen somehow, a sick prank. Then the digital clock in the corner of the frame cheap red numbers. Always a minute fast-clicked from 12:11 to 12:12. The gas station wall clock above her register clicked too. "Lift," she whispered, and tasted metal. On the tape, something moved at the edge of the frame, a ripple in the dark by the door, like a shadow deciding to be legs. The door opened without sound. A shape entered that wasn't he. A person so much as a gap around which the room bent taller than the frame wanted to hold. Joined it wrong. Careful not to touch anything. The camera's microphone picked up her sleeping breath. In, out, then a second breath. Dry and papery. Almost in time. Her phone was on the counter. She dialed 911, thumb ready to press, then stopped when the shape leaned over her sleeping self. And the feed went crooked with a small jolt like the camera had been nudged. She hadn't seen a camera on her ceiling. She hadn't put one there. The thing placed something on the nightstand. The tape's color bled a little. Edges haloed by cheap magnetic tape, but she knew that shape instantly. The same brown package the man had just left on her counter. On screen, the sleeping version of her flinched and didn't wake. The shadow's head tilted no face. Houston Angle in the second breath matched hers perfectly now, counting. It raised a long hand, touched her shoulder lightly. Intamin Leand, the TV picture fluttered cracked, and for a single skeletal frame, she saw what the camera must have been capturing before the edit. Her own face turned toward the lens, eyes wide open, pupils pinned mouth, trying not to move. The tape shoved itself back to normal like a guilty blink. She stabbed at 911. The call failed to connect. The bars on her phone were fine. The data icons spinning like a polite lie. The station's lights dimmed half a step as if the building had inhaled and returned. On screen, the bedroom door opened again. The shape withdrew, its outline catching on the frame, leaving a smear the way oil leaves a rainbow on water. The red digits clicked to 12:13. At her register, the wall clock clicked to 12:13. She ran to the window. The lot was empty. The nozzles still bled numbers into nothing. In the glass, her reflection looked like someone standing just behind her, which made her turn so fast her neck popped. When she faced the screen again, the angle had changed. It was no longer ceiling height. It was lower, bedside, at throat level. She could see the stubble on her own jawline she always missed, a silver thread of drool at the corner of her mouth. The box on the nightstand was gone. Her store phone rang. It was the back office line, the one no one used after 10. She picked up, without saying hello. Check under the counter, said her voice. Not a recording. Not a distortion. Her voice stripped of breath. Before it finishes, she looked down. Under the register shelf, by the emergency flashlight, was a second VHS tape, identical and unlabeled. Her hands shook as she swapped tapes. The first slid out warm. The second sucked in like a held breath. This time, the footage was of the gas station. Same aisle, same counter, same cheap kitchen carousel spinning slow. The camera was somewhere low, pointed up, gathering her in a bad angle that made her look like a stranger. The timestamp read 12:14. On the screen, bell chimed. She watched herself watch the man arrive and place the package. She watched herself look down. She watched the man not have a reflection in the convex mirror. Then the feed didn't follow him. It followed her. It stayed on her face as relief curdled, as wonder turned to fear. It stayed when her eyes found the monitor. It stayed when she picked up the store phone to listen to her own voice, tell her what to do. She raised her head from the reel counter and looked at the camera, looked at nothing, looked straight into the lens that must have been filming from somewhere around her knees. On the tape, behind her small, faint, but there the bathroom door eased open. She glanced back. The real bathroom door was shut. The air around its seam was colder, like a smile pressed through a crack. On the TV, her doppelganger at the counter didn't turn. The tall, jointed lack of a person that had stood by her bed slid out of the restroom, careful and patient, its hands held like prayer. It stopped at her back. It looked down at the tape in her hands. The monitor behind the counter went black. The tape kept playing. The figure on the screen leaned close to her ear and whispered something that made the VCRS speakers hiss. The version of her on-screen nodded slowly, as if sleepwalking in. Set the phone politely back in its cradle. The real store phone clicked, line dead. She tried the door. It wouldn't open. The bell hung limp and silent, not even daring to swing. On screen, the thing reached past her and lifted the brown package she hadn't opened yet. It turned the lid, laid it flat, and showed her something she couldn't see through the bad angle. Only the shape. Plastic cracked, black ribbon, a square she knew without reading. It was a third tape. The label, for the first time, had writing. "Sis quintef. In this green, lousy light." The marker read, "Tomorrow." The thing set it gently in front of on-screen her and placed one long finger to where its mouth would be, as if asking for quiet, as if telling her the only rule. The store lights dimmed again. The sleet hissed louder. From the bathroom door, something exhaled long, dry, patient hand matched her breath perfectly, counting. The tunnel screams they'd dropped into the Detroit tunnel after midnight, boots clanking ladder rungs, flashlights carving dust into ribbons. The air was cold and clean in that dead city way, like nothing had breathed there in years. When Jaime cracked a joke about tetanus and curses, their laughter went sharp and too loud, ricocheting down the concrete throat until it sounded like more people were laughing with him. They walked 10 minutes. The temperature fell. Breath began to smoke. Somewhere ahead, faint and papery, a scream lifted and peeled across the curve of the tunnel. They froze, grins dying in sync. Another scream, closer. Not words, just a tearing sound, like someone finding the bottom of their voice. "Homeless, maybe," Nico said, but he was already aiming his light low, like not too blind whoever was down there. The beam slid over stripped copper, spray paint, a dead rat's husk, nothing living. The scream came again, and Jaime flinched. It had his timing. Same stutter on the inhale as when he laughed. They tried talking instead of joking. Calm, even tones. "Hello, we're leaving," Leah called. Her voice came back warped, 15 seconds late, pitched higher, like a kid repeating a password wrong. Nico swallowed. "Record it," he said, and hit his phone's voice memo. They kept walking, kept hearing their words return as skinned versions of themselves. At the next bend, someone sobbed just ahead a thin, breathless hitch-hitch. Leah lifted her light and saw only wet concrete glistening like skin. "We should go back," she said. Her voice returned a moment later, sobbing, the syllables pulled long. "We should go back." They turned. Behind them, in the black they'd already walked through, someone laughed. It was Nico's laugh exactly, right down to the wheeze at the end, only now it hurt to hear. A laugh with teeth. "Cut it out," he snapped at the dark. The tunnel snapped it back, harsh and layered, like a dozen Nikos boxed into the walls. They started moving faster. The screams began to stack. Jaime's broken hoarse laugh inverted into a shriek. Leah's steady hello stretched into a whine until the word wasn't a word, just tension on a string. The cadence matched their steps, their breaths. Their lights jittered. The phone in Nico's hand vibrated new recording. Tunnel_01 then. Immediately another tunnel_02 without him touching it. Each file's waveform bloomed and clipped, like something with a long mouth pressing too close to the mic. "Stop," Leah said, and they all did, muscles locking like a shared flinch. The tunnel went quiet enough to hear water somewhere far, far down. They counted 2, 3 without speaking, as if the numbers themselves would summon a reply. 1, 2, 3. Silence. They exhaled. Then the tunnel exhaled 2, 3 long, slow breaths that weren't theirs, as if a sleeping thing had just learned how to breathe by listening to them try not to. They ran. The ladder felt a mile away. Every word they had dropped on the way in came chasing. Jokes turned to pleas. Greetings turned to keens. Their nervous laughs stretched into knives. The tunnel-discovered echo wasn't enough. It started getting ahead of them, throwing their panic forward so they would find it waiting. At the last bend, Leah's own voice begged from the dark. "Don't look," ripped raw. She looked. The concrete there was wet with condensation, a slick sheen that moved. It rippled in little waves timed to their breaths, as if the moisture remembered the shape of sound and was practicing wearing it. In the reflected light, the walls seemed to have mouths just Ripple sand, every ripple trembled to the rhythm of their names, said Wrong. They hit the ladder, scrambled up, boots slipping, hands burning on cold metal. Nico hauled himself over the lip and turned to pull Jaime up. Halfway, the tunnel below laughed again. That perfect Nico wheeze, but now, from above. The laugh came from the alley behind them, from the bricks, from the hollow of the fire escape. Sound had climbed out. They didn't speak for the entire drive home. The city outside felt upholstered in their voices, hissing their words under tires, fiddling their cadences through chain link. At Leah's apartment, they sat in her kitchen. Lights all on. Nico opened his phone. The recordings list scrolled on and on. Tunnel_01 through tunnel_203. Each time stamped 4 times they hadn't been there. He tapped. The first, it was their laughter, exactly as they'd made it, bright and mean from nerves. The second was the same, pitched up. The third was the same, pitched down. By tunnel_07, the laugh had no curve left. It was a straight line drawn too hard. The sound of a grin being peeled off. Delete, Jaime said. Nico held down the button. The files didn't vanish. Instead, new ones populated. Apartment_01, timestamped now. Then street_01. Then bedroom_01. Leah's baby monitor in the next room crackled. She didn't have a baby. They stood in the doorway and watched the screen go green, sensor waking to motion that wasn't there. The speaker hissed once, then settled. A thin sound crept in, careful with its new legs. "Hello," Leah's voice said from the monitor. 10 seconds late, like a stranger learning her mouth. Then Nico's laugh answered from the wall, proud of itself. Then Jaime's scream joined from the vents. Perfect. Delayed. Waiting exactly long enough to make sure they recognized it. The motel key. The clerk slid the tarnished room key across the counter without meeting his eyes. "Never used the spare key," she said, voice flat like it had been practiced too many times. "If you lose yours, come get me. Do not open for anyone." Room 12 smelled like old bleach and colder water. The salesman wedged a chair under the knob, killed the TV's hiss, and tried to sleep. At 2 a.m., the lock clicked. Soft, deliberate. The handle turned against the chair. Metal whispered, like someone feeding a second key into the cylinder. He sat up, heart jamming his throat. "Wrong room," he called, forcing his voice steady. The handle stopped. Then a second lock. He had NT. Touched the little interior latch. He flipped on, twitched, and lifted by itself. Like someone on the other side had its twin. A shadow slipped under the door. Not feet. The absence of light, like a new cut in the night. The chair trembled. The door eased inward an inch, the chain stretching to its limit. "Front desk," a man's voice whispered. "You reported a leak." "I didn't," the salesman said, but his gaze had already tracked to the bathroom. The tile grout was wet and dark. Water was pooling from under the door, silent, steady. "See?" the voice breathed. "Open up." The chain pulled tight, metal whining. The spare key in the lock turned again. Patient, precise. The salesman grabbed his suitcase and the motel phone. Deadline. Deadline. He snatched his key from the nightstand, the original. Heavy with a brass fob stamped 12 and stared. The tack had another hole. A second keyring scar. Like it used to hold, too. From the bathroom, the drip changed. It wasn't water now. Not exactly. Add. Rhythm. A slow tap-tap-tap, like finger pads, drumming porcelain, keeping time with his pulse. He crept to the peephole. The hallway was empty. No one. At the door. Just the flicker of a vending machine end light, and the fire map peeling on the far wall. But as he watched, the peephole dimmed, like someone leaned in close enough to breathe on it from the other side. The glass fogged for a heartbeat. A pale oval filled the view. An eye. No. The round pressed surface of a brass key head, polished bright. It jolted bike, the chain shuddered. The door eased another inch. The air tasted like old coins. "Sir," the voice said. Right against the wood now. Smaller, younger, like a child repeating a line. Never use the spare key. That's what she said, he answered, throat raw. Because then, the voice said cheerfully, you've already given it back. The bathroom light snapped on. The salesman hadn't touched the switch. In the mirror over the sink, something stood where he should have been if he'd walked in. A figure in a soaked gray suit, head bent, water running from cuffs and collar as if the desert night were a river. It lifted its hand and set a motel key on the edge of the sink room. 12 stamped bright on the brass fob, then knocked once on the mirror from the wrong side. Knock answered, knock on the door. The chain fell, not broke fell, as if it had never been latched at all. No, the salesman said, already moving for the window. He yanked the curtains. The pane was screwed shut. Of course it was. The door swung open a palm's width. Then another. The room's light bent around a shape that didn't throw a shadow. On the nightstand, the brass fob skated a fraction by itself, tugging toward the door as if on a thread. He clutched it tighter. It pulled harder. He felt the exact weight of a second key tugging from the other side, equal and opposite, dragging him like a magnet. Take the stairs, the voice suggested pleasantly. Now behind him, now under the bed, now in the walls. Don't look back. He ran. The hallway was empty and too long. Room numbers repeated 10, 11, 12, then 10. Again, like the corridor had been folded wrong. He hit the stairwell. Metal and echoing. Down one flight. 2. At the bottom, a glass door to the parking lot waited, exit printed backward and hopeful. He slammed into it. It didn't budge. A neat little sign was taped to the glass, please use spare key. His hand lifted without his permission. The key in his grip slid forward, drawn to the lock like it knew the way home. He caught his wrist with his other hand, muscles shaking, breath tearing. On the other side of the glass, in the reflected black, he saw the lobby behind him, impossible, wrong angle where. The clerk stood at her desk, watching. Her face was pale, her lips moving as she whispered something over and over. He squinted. The words weren't a warning. They were a count. 11, 12. Behind him, somewhere up the stairwell, a dozen doors opened all at once, hinges yawning in unison. The key jerked, sudden and hard, like someone had yanked it from the other side. It tore free, skittered across the concrete, and slid neatly under the glass door, as if the floor had a seam it could pass through. The lock turned. The door opened inward, not to the parking lot, not to desert night, but to room 12. His room. The bed rumpled, the bathroom light on, water pooling under the door. A perfect loop, smelling of bleach and coins. On the bed, something lay under the covers. The shape of a man turned on his side, mouth near the phone, whispering softly. It sounded like him. It sounded like a warning. From the stairwell above, the clerk's voice arrived at the edge of panic, the count breaking. Something hissed, like a key sliding home. Too late. The salesman did the only thing left. He ran through the door into his own room and slammed it behind him. At 2:01 a.m., down at the front desk, the bell chimed. The clerk didn't look up. She reached under the counter and brought out a small wooden box, lined with dozens of brass fobs, each one stamped with a room number. Each hook held 2 keys, except for the one labeled 12. That hook was finally full again. The silent caller had started the night the heat broke. At 2:14 a.m., his cell shivered on the nightstand and lit the room sickly blue. Unknown caller. He thumbed it on. Nothing. Just a soft, steady breath, not quite human, like someone practicing being alive. He hung up. It rang again the next night at exactly 2:14. Same breath, same patient listening. By night 3, he spoke first. Hello, who is this? Knock it off, and the breathing hitched, as if surprised to be heard, then fell back into rhythm. On night 5, I let it play. He counted 97 inhales before the line clicked dead. On night 6, he tried to call back. The number was blocked, the trail dead. He turned his phone off and still woke at 2:14. Sure a sound had threaded the house. The AC was silent. The vents were still. In the darkness, something exhaled from below the floorboards, dust sifting like a whisper. On night 7, he had the police on the line, a dispatcher staying with him until the trace finished. "We've got it," she said, cheerful and tinny. "Local. Very local." A beat, her tone changed. "Sir, are you alone?" Before he could answer, the call-waiting tone chimed. The unknown caller was back. "Las 12:14. Emeto de... Don't pick up," the dispatcher said. "We have the originating source." "Where?" he asked. There was a pause long enough to feel deliberate. "The landline registered to your address," she said. "Basement phone." He laughed, too loud, because he didn't have a basement phone. The previous owner had cut the line. He'd seen the frayed cable nailed to the joist like an old vein. He told her that. She didn't laugh. "Stay on with me," she said. "Units are en route." He patted down the hallway anyway, because the house had narrowed to a single point. The door at the top of the basement stairs, black seam around it like a held breath. He switched on the stairlight. It didn't come. The unknown caller chimed again. He put the phone to his ear and didn't speak. Down the stairs, in the dark, something breathed back, perfectly synced to the sound in his phone. Inhale, exhale. The same lungs in two places. He opened the basement door. The smell of cold earth rose up, wet and old. He stepped onto the first stair. Wood creaked. On the line, the breathing paused, as if listening to his foot test the riser. "Sir," the dispatcher asked, "I need you to stay upstairs." He took another step. The breathing resumed, closer now, a warmth gathering on the underside of the door, fogging the gap. He said, "Who are you?" The phone hissed. Then a voice came in, not through the earpiece, but from the bottom of the stairs. The same words arriving a fraction later on the line, like an echo that learned how to talk. Finally, it said, in his own voice, worn thin, "I've been trying to wake you." The basement light snapped on by itself. It wasn't the bulb at the top of the stairs. It was a lamp he didn't own, a yellow pool trembling over the old workbench. In that circle sat his landline. The fat, beige kind from the 90s. Handset off the hook, cord coiled like a sleeping thing. The cut cable that should have hung dead was spliced clumsily with electrical tape, the other end disappearing into the cinder block wall where no conduit ran. His cell vibrated. The dispatcher. Too loud. Too bright. "Officers are pulling up now. Stay with me." He took one more step. The basement phone lifted itself an inch, as if a hand had found it from below, and settled back into the cradle. The breathing stopped. His cell went silent. From the wall, taped spliced throbbed once, like a pulse. Upstairs, a hard knock rattled the front door. "Police," a voice shouted. Relief hit him so hard, he swayed. He turned from the dark and hurried back up, down the hall, to the entry. He peered through the peephole. Empty porch. Dead yard. No cruiser. No lights. Just his own front door, and on the other side of it, his own voice, perfectly calm. "It's open." He stepped back, heart flipping, and his phone lit again. Unknown caller, 214. He answered without thinking, and heard the dispatcher's voice not live, but recorded saying, "Units are en route," looped in a slow, wrong cadence, like someone practicing the shape of the sentence. Under it, a soft clatter, as if a handset were being set down on concrete. He ran to the bedroom, grabbed his keys, and that was when he noticed the photo frames on the dresser not facing out, but turned toward the wall, like they'd been told to watch. In the reflection of the dark TV, he saw the basement door still open, the stairwell lit now by that trembling yellow, and a figure standing halfway up his height, his shoulders, head tilted, listening. It inhaled. He did too, on instinct. The sound matched perfectly. From the phone, His own voice, thin as thread. "I told you. I've been calling." The front door knocked again. Softer this time, from inside. He did not open it. He did not run. He stood still and watched the reflection as the figure turned away, step by careful step, descending into the house beneath his house, toward a phone that wasn't supposed to work. At 2:15, every device in the home went dark. In the pitch-black quiet, the only sound was breathing from the floor, and patient and practiced, and the soft click of a cradle returning to its base, miles closer than the police would ever get.